Everybody to our August 1st regular commissioners meeting, and as usual we'll start off with our invocation, and I'm going to call on Commissioner Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasure tonight to introduce our Trent Hopkins. Come on up to the podium there. Trent's with Providence City Church, which is a church up at Indian Trail. They just purchased some property. They're building a new campus up there, and I think from going to church there occasionally and hearing Trent, he could probably do stand up if he didn't do.
I can do it right now.
Yeah, but we appreciate you coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, will y'all bow your heads as we pray? Heavenly Father, on behalf of all who are gathered here today, we say thank you. Thank you for your many blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the health you give us that we need to fulfill our callings and the many ways you provide for us to sustain us and to keep us moving forward. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work for our county, for the honor and the responsibility to do the work you've called us to. Ultimately, we thank you for the grace and the love and the kindness that you pour out on us each day. For this meeting, we pray specifically for some things. We pray for wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our time. Pray for a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people. We pray for confidence in what is good and fitting and right and true. Pray for the ability to work together in harmony even when there's honest disagreement. Pray for personal peace in the lives of all who are here and joy in their task. May every decision and every conversation be seasoned with grace and truth. Pray for the agenda set before today, and I pray that you would remind us that even as we plan and prepare and discuss different matters, we can rest in the fact that you are sovereign over everything, including our lives individually and corporately. Remind us today that the plans of man are many, but it's your will that will prevail. We trust you to lead us and to guide us and to care for us as we pursue a productive meeting. Pray all this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Trent. Thank you. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Simpson. Okay, we have nobody signed up for informal comments. We'll go to our public hearings. We're going to have a public hearing on Union County Public Schools General Obligation Bond Referendum, and I will call on Beverly Lyles, our finance CFO.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Manager. This afternoon, we're holding a public hearing on a school bond referendum request from Union County Public Schools. This bond referendum has been requested to be placed on the November ballot. The bond referendum will be to fund a new Forest Hills High School and East Elementary School. The total amount of the requested bond is $134,405,000. It's anticipated, if this is approved by voters, that the county would issue the debt in calendar year 2023, with the debt service payments beginning in fiscal year 2024, with an estimated maximum debt service impact of $13,620,000 a year, or the equivalent of a 3.5 cents property tax rate. Thank you.
Anybody want to speak on the public hearing for the Union County Public Schools General Obligation Bond Referendum? If not, okay, I will close the public hearing on the Union County Public Schools General Obligation Bond Referendum. Now we'll move into the public hearing for South Piedmont Community College General Obligation Bond Referendum. And again, Ms. Lyles.
Yes. South Piedmont Community College has requested a bond referendum be placed on the November ballot. The bond referendum will be to fund a Center for Entrepreneurship in the amount of $32,725,000. Again, it's anticipated if this bond referendum is approved by voters, we would issue the debt in calendar year 2023, with debt service impacts beginning in fiscal year 2024. The estimated maximum debt service impact would be $3,303,000, or the equivalent of 0.85 cents of a property tax rate.
Is anybody here to speak for or against the South Piedmont public hearing? If not, I will close the public hearing. Okay, next, public hearing on Pilgrim's Pride Corporation Project Enhance to consider a Step 1 Economic Development Incentive Grant in an amount not to exceed $48,000 over a 5-year period. And Mr. Ron Mall will present to us.
Thank you, Chairman Rape, Commissioners, Manager Watson. It's my pleasure to bring before you tonight an Economic Development Incentive Grant request from Pilgrim's Pride Corporation, otherwise referred to as Project Enhance. Pilgrim's Pride Corporation is a subsidiary of JBS Corporation of Brazil, and their North American headquarters is in Greeley, Colorado. The Marshville Pilgrim's facility currently employs 800 people. The company continually strives to improve efficiency, profitability, and workplace safety. With those goals in mind, the company began conversations with our office in the early spring of this year about the potential investment of $3,200,000 to purchase and install state-of-the-art production equipment. This equipment will allow Pilgrim's Pride to automate its thigh deboning line. The automation will not only increase the total pounds of chicken processed during a shift, but more importantly, it will reduce repetitive motion fatigue for employees who currently perform the deboning by hand. The equipment also enables the current employees to be cross-trained to other positions, and there is no plan to reduce employee headcount. Again, this company is considering a $3.2 million investment. If Union County is the selected location, this automation equipment is targeted for installation fourth quarter of this year. The company has indicated that incentives are a very important factor for the project, in that these incentives help generate the project's return on investment. Tonight, we're requesting your consideration of a Step 1 Economic Development Incentive Grant in an amount not to exceed $48,000 to be paid over 5 years beginning in fiscal year 2024, based upon Union County Tax Office's appraised value each year on the company's anticipated investment of $3.2 million. Based on this investment and holding all other factors constant, including depreciation, the company would pay estimated ad valorem taxes on the new taxable investment of $94,000 over the grant period. And when we consider depreciation, the anticipated economic development grant would be $41,280. And the estimated ad valorem revenue is $89,909 over the 5-year grant period. Of course, actual tax revenue to Union County will be based on the current tax rate applied to the assessed value of the investment each year after depreciation. We shared this project with the Monroe Union County Economic Development Board of Advisors at their July 12th meeting, where they supported our bringing the project to you tonight for your consideration. As we do with all of our projects, we perform a cost-benefit analysis. This project shows a 2.05 to 1 return over the first 5 years of the project or the grant period. And that increases to 7.76 to 1 over the life of the project. Therefore, the Monroe Union County Economic Development Board of Advisors and staff recommend the award of this Step 1 performance-based incentive grant to Pilgrim's Pride Corporation in an amount not to exceed $48,000 in order to help secure this $3.2 million investment. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Micah Abernathy, who is the complex manager at Pilgrim's Marshville facility, and Mike is available to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Any comments? Mike, if you would come up just a minute. I do want to thank you and the whole Pilgrim's Pride team for their investment in Union County. And not only is it an investment at your plant, but the producers in Union County and surrounding counties. And thank you very much for all you do. I know your day starts very early and runs very late, and people just don't know till they see it, what all you do. Do you have any comments? If not, you can, we appreciate your work that y'all are doing.
We're glad to be a part of this community. I'm from here, so it's good to be back home and be able to be back in this community. So we're glad to be here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Manager Watson is going to lead us into our recognizing and calling the act recipients.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We have some special individuals to recognize this evening. You may be aware, and we have introduced our Caught in the Act program to you in the past. Tonight, we are here to recognize the recipient of the 2021 annual Caught in the Act Award. And just as a reminder, these awards come about and they are for the purpose of recognizing our employees that go above and beyond their normal duties, that does something special for the residents that they serve, or that they add value to the work that they do, above and beyond what would normally be expected. So these individuals that you'll be introduced to in just one moment were all nominated by their peers as a way of recognizing them and saying thank you for their work, for adding value, and for being special people in the workplace. So without further ado, I believe we have a short video that I'll ask the text to please play at this time.
I don't think it's a cliche that our employees are our biggest asset, and every day they go above and beyond, and every once in a while it's just nice to recognize those individuals that are seen going above and beyond by their employees. So I think it's good for their departments, I think it's good for the organization, and as a member of the management team, we just like to see and support those individuals.
I won the Caught in the Act Award for an overnight stay in the hospital with one of the children on my caseload. He had surgery at Duke Medical Center in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I stayed overnight with him. So this child was in a group home and transitioning to an adoptive placement, so he didn't have any family or anyone able to be with him in the hospital. So of course I didn't hesitate to spend that time with him so that he wouldn't have to be alone at the hospital.
We had two little boys that were under the care of DSS, and they had been placed in a family home and they were burned. So with Burn Children's Fund, we were able to support the little boys and offer them some financial assistance. And also we worked with Safe Kids, and we were able to bring gun locks in for the foster families and that type of thing.
I was nominated for Caught in the Act for helping out a lady that was in a car crash. I was in the military. I was in the 2nd Ranger Battalion, former Ranger. And when I was working, I heard the crash, told my supervisor, like, hey, there's a crash here, I'm gonna go over there. I went over there, I saw a lady, single vehicle in a tree. That's what I saw. And then what I did was I kind of helped her out. I noticed she had a gash on her forehead. She was kind of incoherent a little bit. So I administered first aid based off of prior training that I've had. Kind of patched her wound just a little bit so it stopped the bleeding, and called 911.
I was able to help get a donated van for a child that was in foster care who was quadriplegic and just needed a way to be transported. And someone had a van and donated it. So it needed some work because it had been sitting. So we actually had other people who donated to have new tires put on it, have it serviced, oil changed, things like that it needed, so that the foster parents can have a way to transport the child.
I don't think the public truly understands all of what county government does. We are involved in a lot of different areas and interact with a lot of different people. It amazes me what individuals are willing to do, not only for coworkers, friends, or family, but for just complete strangers. And we are put in those positions where we can interact with those strangers, and every once in a while we have the ability to help them in their time of need. And I think that's what these 4 individuals have shown that county employees can't do. It's the true definition of a public servant.
Being presented the Call Me Act Award was a huge surprise to me, because to me, I was just doing my job. And to be recognized for doing my job, it was just like above and beyond. Because all I wanted to ever do when I worked here was to just be able to help those in need, especially the children and their families.
So I am so honored to work with these families every day. I get to walk with them through some of the most difficult days of their lives. So having an award is great. I love the recognition, but it's my job. So I think that anyone that is in this position would do the same thing that I did.
It shows that the county has trust in its employees. Also, it boosts morale.
It's an honor, really, if you get 4 a year, and just to be nominated was an honor.
We appreciate what you do on a daily basis. We know these 4 individual events are not the only thing you've done all year. You do this every day. You do it with grace, and you are the face of Union County, and we couldn't be more proud of you.
Members of the commission, please let me introduce these 4 individuals to you. And if I could have you please come up here in front of the dais. First, we have Pam Jose. And next, we have Miss Gloria Haney. And next, Beth Belt. And last, but certainly not least, Mr. Charles Gabb. And if I could have the management team come up here with these folks, and we're going to take the opportunity to get our picture made with y'all. All right. So I think that as you watch that video, some of the things that stand out to me are these people have the heart of a servant. The humility, the willingness to jump in and help others when it's not expected. It's just who they are and what they do. And I'll tell you, I just want to say personally thank you for each of you for everything that you do. You make us proud. So unfortunately, we can only select one for the annual Caught in the Act Award. And so I'm going to give Michelle Lancaster the honor of presenting this year's annual Caught in the Act Award.
And that's Pam Jose. As Mark said, all of these folks have done outstanding work, more than these one thing. But Pam, as a child welfare social worker, has done some incredible work with people at the worst times of their lives. And this was just one example. She's been nominated multiple times. She has recently flown cross country with someone who's in our custody to make sure that they got the best care that they could, all the way in Arizona. And she did it without missing a beat and did it with grace. And we really do appreciate everything that all of you do. But thank you so much and congratulations, ma'am.
Thank you.
We really appreciate everything you do for the residents of Union County. Pam, could we get a photograph of you, please? Thank you. So, you know, we have another annual award to present, and one of the things that we stress in our workplace culture is collaboration, working together as teams. And, you know, a lot of times people come together to solve problems, to address issues, to provide assistance to our residents. And they're not part of a formal workplace team. But it may be people that work together, you know, in the same department or in the same work area. It may be people that work together across departments, but they come together and they do something really special as a group that exemplifies collaboration, teamwork, and the things that we all strive for. So we felt like that we really needed to recognize these special teams, and this year we have 3 different teams that we want to recognize, and at this time I'm going to introduce each of the teams and read just a snippet about why they were nominated by their peers. So first, if we could have the folks from our Parks and Recreation Department, Victoria Crow, Eric Dorman, and Lilith Smith, if you could please come to the front. And as they come, if y'all just right over here, they were nominated for, they called it in the ACT Team Award for stepping in to help someone who was having a heart attack at Cane Creek Park. These 3 employees rushed to the aid of the heart attack victim to ensure that the person received timely medical attention, and they all arrived just before first responders. So they were truly the first responders in this particular situation that helped this person in their time of need. Next is a team nominated from our Human Services Agency, and if I could have you please come, Crystal Robinson, Erica High, and Heather Horn. You know, and we all recognize that the last few years have been incredibly difficult, and these 3 ladies were nominated for a Caught in the Act Team Award by a number of folks in the agency for all of their many efforts in community engagement and health promotions for the Human Services Agency. These employees have done everything from making calls to homebound seniors during the period in time where we were really struggling through COVID, running meal routes to make sure that those individuals, that no one went without a homebound meal that was entitled to one. They went into historically marginalized communities, ensuring residents were informed about COVID-19, the impacts, the vaccine sites that were available. Most recently, this trio distributed flyers for the emergency rental assistance program at a number of our locations, including at the Union County Courthouse, through nonprofit agencies, food pantries, grocery stores, and clinics. And their efforts resulted in the second highest number of applications being submitted through that emergency rental program, a program that really touches those in need in our community. And we thank them for that. And last, we have one more team, Rosemary Grulian and Liz Rukenbrow. was close. Okay, Rosemary and Liz are nominated for the Cotton Team Award for designing and building and stocking a lifelike treat tree for the Child Health Clinic as a way to help rising rates of depression and anxiety in teens and adolescents due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. These employees even purchased items for the tree out of their own pocket to ensure the teens and adolescents visiting the health clinic had a fun surprise at the end of their visit. Their efforts brought plenty of smiles to the faces of the clinic's visitors. And if I could ask Brian and Patrick and Michelle to join me. And I tell you, can we get a picture with all them? Do we have a camera with a wide enough image? Can we scrunch all in here and let's take get a good picture.
One, two, three. Okay.
Good? Yep. All right. So, I'll tell you that, again, each of you went above and beyond what was expected to serve the residents of our county, and we as a management team agreed that there was no way that we could select one team over another. So y'all are all recipients of the annual Cotton Team Award. Certificate there for you, and we also have a bag full of goodies here that's been prepared for you, so if you would please take that with you. But again, thank you so much for everything you do. You exemplify what it means to care for other people and respond to their needs, and what more can we say? Y'all are superstars. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that opportunity, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. You know, as Patrick said in the video, our employees are our greatest asset. We could not provide the services to the residents of Union County that are both expected and needed without individuals like these who work hard every day. And we certainly do appreciate their efforts. So thank you very much for the opportunity to recognize them this evening.
Thank you. I'm going to call Deputy Manager Michelle Lancaster to do the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And tonight we also have another recognition for our IT department, and I just want to say a few words and then have John Emilio, our Information Technology Director, come up. The Center for Digital Government, part of Government Technology Magazine, sponsors an annual ranking of municipalities by like size based on best practices and implementations of technology solutions. For 2021-2022, Union County has moved from the 10th ranking previously to 8th ranking across the country for mid-sized jurisdictions. As you all will remember, John has been with us almost a year, so he and his team have really been working hard, and we're really proud of this accomplishment. We also attached in the agenda item the news article that can show you who we're ranked against. And so again, I want to recognize John and his team for great work that they've done to move from 10th place to 8th place in the country for our technology and the work that he's doing. John? You're not going to say anything? Give him a round of applause, I think.
John, I hear nothing but great things about it.
Right.
One, two, three.
I saw you at a child's function at Weddington Elementary. Yeah. His child and my grandchild was in a play at Weddington Elementary that was quite good. Okay. August service rewards. The purpose of this is to acknowledge employees, service award recipients and retirees for the month of August. When I used to see people retiring when I taught school, I'd think they are so lucky. Just, it's a golden halo. August Service Award recipients, Beverly Martin in Social Services, 5 years. Casey Summerlin, Social Services, 5 years. Donald Ziegler, Tax Administration, 5 years. Our retirements, Ralph Ford, Sheriff's Office, 12 years. Victoria Purser, Community Support and Outreach, 21 years. And Marshall Lemons, better known as Shan, from Fleet Management, 28 years. And I imagine he spent today on the ocean somewhere with his daddy fishing. I'd like to thank all y'all. Okay. We have the consent agenda, and I'm going to pull 22-561 and put it in our business discussion. And I believe Vice Chairman Williams has one he wants to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to add to business a discussion of our noise nuisance ordinance, which is section 26, I believe, in our code, for purposes of discussing our noise ordinance and hopefully giving some direction to staff.
Okay. And I believe Commissioner Helms has got one he will add.
Yeah, we got, like for us to discuss a meeting we had with the town of Waxhaw and DOT that Commissioner Vice Chairman Williams and myself were allowed to participate. Would like to share with the public and staff as well.
Okay, and I'm going Cumberson Road. Okay, and I'm going to add one, and it didn't really have a name, but it's tasking staff and procedures for thereof with time-consuming task. Yes. Ma'am.
You have the one to remove from the consent. You have removed, it's the first item on the consent.
22-482.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we'll remove 22-482, our contract for landscaping restoration for public works. And we want to just park that right now. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the amended consent agenda?
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm gonna break tradition. Well, I say break tradition. I can go ahead and call for a vote on the public hearings. Mr. Long, I can go ahead and get the public hearings vote out of the way, right?
Yes.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Probably ought to move to suspend the rules and move this fund.
Okay. Okay, first up, the the Union County Public Schools General Obligation Bond Referendum. I will make a motion. What? All right, I'd like to make a motion to rescind the rules.
Suspend. Suspend.
Suspend. Okay. All in favor? Aye. And I'm just doing this for the people that may be, I don't want to keep you here at the end of our agenda. Although we do have some coming up that schools might be interested in on the Cumberson Road project. Okay, on the Union County Public Schools General Obligation Bond Referendum, does anybody want to make a motion for the vote?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we accept the resolution for the Union County Public Schools Bond Referendum.
Okay, any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
You have
Yeah.
to adopt the bond orders first before you can adopt the resolution. There's 3 items that need to be adopted.
We have to adopt the bond ordinance. What number is it, Beverly?
It's in the same, it's 22,538 on business.
Seems like I'm making a mess of this. What page is it on?
29.
What?
29.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. All right. Do you need to present, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just pulling up the bond orders so you can see them, and also
Okay.
the resolution, so it is in full screen mode. You, at your last meeting, introduced the bond orders and read them entirely. You do not have to read through those again, but they are here for review. The resolution is here for review also. The resolution actually sets the bond language. So you have 3 items that need to be adopted.
Okay, now do we have to read the resolution into it?
No, you do not have to read it
Okay.
entirely. It's included in your package.
You may have said that, but my hearing is. Okay, I will make a motion first to adopt the bond order authorizing the issuance of $134,405,000 general obligation school bonds of the County of Union, North Carolina. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, number 2, adopt a bond order authorizing the issuance of $32,725,000 general obligation community college bonds of the County of Union, North Carolina. I make a motion that we adopt that bond order. All in favor? Aye.
Nay.
Commissioner Simpson, did you vote for?
I did.
Okay. Commissioner Rushing? Okay. 4-1. Okay. And adopt the resolution setting a special bond referendum and directing the publication of notice of a special bond referendum and notification of the Union County Board of Elections. Okay. Need a motion on that?
Motion.
Got a
is
motion?
presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I was so proud of the way I made it through the public hearings that I sort of forgot to tag home plate and got tagged out. Okay, on the public hearing with Pilgrim's Pride Corporation, a Step 1 Economic Development Incentive Grant in an amount not to exceed $48,000 over a 5-year period. We've heard the public hearing presentation. I'll make a motion to approve it. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. The industrial pretreatment program and sewer use ordinance that we talked about at 4:30. Brian, take it.
Yes, sir. So previously, the commissioners, I'm going to pull this up so you have it and you can. So on two occasions, staff has brought to you the potential for some new programs, a cross-connection control and industrial pretreatment program. As the Board of Governors, you met earlier today to consider the penalties and fees associated with these programs. Board of Governors did authorize those penalties and fees. At this time, the Board of Commissioners is responsible for adopting the ordinance language that applies with these particular programs and also the penalties and fees. We have done the presentation with you previously on those ordinance requirements. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Penalties and fees for the public's awareness. There are, for enforcement of cross-control connection, there are 7 tiers. Start from a notice of deficiency all the way to termination of service if it gets to the point where they're ignoring those issues. There are some program fees that also are part of this, which is a inspection fee for your commercial industrial users, a plan review fee, as well as a program orientation fee. For the industrial pretreatment program, again, we have 7 tiers of fines and penalties. Those range from a notice of deficiency all the way up to a tier 7, which could go as high as $25,000. As pointed out previously, these fees or fines are consistent with the state's model fines and penalties that they have. I'll answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions? Commissioner Simpson.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to item 22.510, industrial pretreatment program and sewer use ordinance, I move we adopt the ordinance amending Article 3 of Chapter 34 of the Union County Code and approve of the penalties set forth in this ordinance as adopted by the Union County Water and Sewer District Board of Governors.
Thank you. We have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Brian, the 22.513.
Yes, sir. Same thing on the cross-control ordinance. I have the enforcement penalties I just mentioned earlier. I did have them on the screen. I can bring them back up if you'd like. This is a program to protect the water integrity for Union County. The IPP program is for our sewer ordinance and for our sewer facility. So cross-connection is the ability to help protect our water system from hazard or anyone who may actually put hazardous chemicals within our system. We have program fees as well as enforcement fines and penalties, and I'll answer any questions you might have about the cross-connection control program.
Commissioner Simpson.
With regard to 22.513, I move that we adopt the ordinance amending Article 2 of Chapter 34 of the Union County Code and approve of the fees and penalties set forth in this ordinance as adopted by the Union County Water and Sewer District Board of Governors.
All right, we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. John Shutak. Brian, you gonna do it?
Introduce Mr. Shutak on this one if you don't mind.
Okay, 22.523.
Thank you, sir. So previously, the board took action to adopt an amendment to our ordinance related to pump stations and how those are approved within the county for our sewer system. And the board's actions were to really basically put on notice that there are some requirements that you want to have in making decisions about where we actually allow pump stations. you directed staff to come up with some methodology for how pump stations could be approved. Doesn't mean that every pump station will or will not be approved, but you wanted some methodology for you to consider for when you are evaluating these particular projects. So staff went out and we did some research and came up with a methodology that we think is a reasonable approach. And I want to stress, this is a methodology for how to move forward with consideration. This is not the contribution side yet for when you decide you wish to have a pump station approved, how that developer or property owner may contribute to the long-term cost of that. That's going to come at a later portion. This is really about that methodology to at least get us to where we understand what is the cost and the benefit of a pump station versus gravity. So Mr. Shutak is going to give you a presentation on that. He's going to go over some examples with you. And the plan is if the board is supportive of this methodology, you would give us that direction tonight, and we would go forward and create the ordinance requirements for that and the process and the actual policy, which we would then bring back to the board at a later date. The plan would be probably late September. And at that point in time, we would have the board give us direction as well on the contribution amount and how the developer or the property owner can contribute to that long-term maintenance on that. So I just wanted to set the stage for what we're here for tonight. It's really about getting your feedback on the methodology. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Shutak.
Sorry about that. Success. Thanks for the introduction, Brian. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Manager, thank you for the time tonight. As Brian mentioned, I'm going to be presenting information on how we might evaluate whether a pump station represents a good value or not to the county. And this is in terms of a life cycle cost analysis. So with that said, first I'm going to talk about what that is. What is a life cycle cost analysis? Then we need to understand what goes into it. So what are the inputs, and then what are we assuming about it? I'll run through a couple of examples. I'll touch on our staff recommendations, how we might look at a cost share, as Brian alluded to, at a future date, and then close up with just some requested actions that we have for the board to take. So what is a life cycle cost analysis? Well, it's defined as the total cost of ownership. So it's the cost of acquiring or constructing the asset, and it's operation, maintenance, service costs, and then decommissioning or disposal costs. So it's the cradle to grave cost of an asset. And why do you use a life cycle cost analysis? Well, it's used to determine which alternative out of a series represents the best value over a given time frame. So that's what this is for. It's a tool in your toolbox, is what we would be using this for.
Is your microphone on? I'm having a lot of trouble here.
Just staying closer. I think it got bent down earlier. That a little better?
A little bit.
Okay. I'll try and speak up a little more. So with the life cycle cost analysis, the basic inputs of it are, one, you need to know some things. So what are those? It's the capital cost of construction, so the initial investment to acquire or construct the asset. And then you need to understand what the individual components of that asset are and what their individual life cycles are, because not everything lasts the same amount of time. So with a pump station, you have things like controls, electrical, mechanical systems. You have civil site improvements, buried infrastructure. You have structural systems, as well as, and you may even have a building. All of those things last a different amount of time. So control systems tend to last the shortest period of time, with your mechanical and electrical systems residing in the middle, And then your structures and buried infrastructure tend to last the longest period of time. So you need to understand where those sit in the array of their lifespans. You also need to understand the cost of money. So what is your rate of inflation, and what is the discount rate or rate of return on an investment? Related to the component costs in the life cycle are the replacement costs or refurbishment costs that you're going to have to invest over time. And then you need to understand what your O&M costs are. So for a pump station, this is primarily going to be focused on electrical costs to operate the station, chemical costs if there's a chemical feed system of any kind, and then any contracted services or staff time that are involved in maintaining that facility. Now, we do have to make some assumptions because we don't know everything at the beginning of the project. So as I mentioned, the life cycle of those various systems. Typically, if you go back to that list, as I said, the control systems and things like painting or coatings are going to fall in that 10-year window. So they're going to last about 10 years before you have to replace them. Electrical and mechanical systems, those are going to last about 20 years on average. And then the buried infrastructure or structural systems, those are going to have a much longer lifespan. So they're going to be 50 years plus. You also need to assume a finite period of time that you're evaluating things over. And this is just the life cycle analysis term. So you're looking at it at a 10-year term, 20-year term, 50, 100, whatever it may be. Your inflation rate is typically going to be based on the Consumer Price Index or ENR's Construction Cost Index. Now, this is going to be a long-term average. So typically, CPI is about 2.3% over a 40-year period. CCI is slightly higher, generally closer to 4% over that same 40-year period, but they're not going to capture spikes in inflation like we're seeing today. Your discount rate is typically assumed to be the same as the inflation rate because the rate of return on an investment is generally going to be in that 2 to 3% rate where typically falls where your average inflation rate is. Excuse me, I'm getting stuck on my words. Also, over time, an asset depreciates. So it's not worth the same amount tomorrow as it was when you first put it in. So in order to account for that, we assume a straight line depreciation, which means it loses the same amount of value year over year over year. Another thing that we need to, a couple other things that we need to understand or assume are at the beginning of a project, we're not going to know necessarily what those individual component costs are or what our actual O&M costs are going to be. So we need a way to estimate those or predict what they might be. And O&M costs are typically expressed as a percentage of capital cost. When you're looking at a pump station, generally speaking, O&M costs are going to range between 1% and 5% of the capital investment year over year. So for the purposes of our examples that I'm going to get to in a minute, we're going to use the midpoint of that range of 3%. So 3% of the capital cost is what your annual O&M expense is going to be. Similarly, those component costs that we talked about, so control systems, mechanical systems, electrical systems, you may not know all of those at the beginning of the project. You may have estimated the cost using a high-level metric like a dollar amount per gallon for the sizing of the pump station, very similar to how you might estimate the cost of a house on a per square foot basis. You don't know what the flooring is going to cost, but you know the house is going to cost you a couple $100 a square foot, right? So we need to be able to assign values to those individual ranges, and those are based on industry standards or best practices. And the end result of all of this is expressed as a net present value. So it's dollars that are in today's value. So now that I've kind of run through very quickly what a life cycle cost is, what goes into it, and what we're assuming, I'm going to run you through a couple of real world examples. And we're just going to be comparing a pump station to a gravity solution. These examples are taken directly from developer-based projects, as are the costs. The one thing that staff did develop was the length of the gravity system to serve the to serve the development. So we assumed an alignment and just estimated what that length would have been. So there's a lot of information here, but I'm going to try and step through this in a straightforward fashion. So on the left-hand side, the first table you see are the inputs. And we're looking at this over a 20-year term. We're using an electrical cost of 8 cents per kilowatt hour. We know our pump horsepower, which is 24 horsepower, and we know the total capital investment was $381,000 for this particular facility. What we're assuming here is the cost of the 10-year items, so controls, coatings, things of that nature, those are going to represent 5% of the total capital investment. The 20-year terms, which is really the bulk of it, the electrical and mechanical systems, those represent 60% of the capital investment. And the 50-year items, so the buried infrastructure, that's going to represent 35% of the overall capital investment. So that's how we're looking at this. We've got an assumed discount rate of 3%, and we know that our pump run time is 5.8 hours per day. So based on the horsepower and the run time, we can and our electrical rate, we can calculate the annual electrical cost, which come out to just over $3,000. The O&M cost is 3% of that initial capital investment. So that $381,000, 3% of that annually is what you're going to spend on O&M. That's the $11,430. So your total annual costs are just under $14,500. When you look at the capital side of things, we're looking at this over a 20-year term. So that total capital cost you see in the middle table on the bottom, capital cost of $647,700. What that's comprised of is the total capital cost of $381,000, the initial investment, then the cost to replace items over that 20-year time frame. So it's replacing the cost of the 10-year items twice and the 10-year items once. So you sum all of those together, and that's what gets you that final number. Now, that investment has a residual value. So you make an investment, and then over time it declines in value. But that residual value is about $328,000. So your net capital cost is $320,000 in this example. When you translate all of that into net present value, so you take your annual calculated costs and your calculated capital costs, translate those into a net present value, and that's the table on the bottom right. So our annual costs for operation, that's the amount of money you would need to make that $14,500 payment for the next 20 years. So you would need to start with that amount of money to have nothing left at the end of 20 years.
John, if you would stop there just a minute.
Certainly.
Just for the benefit of the commissioners. This was all started because pump stations, me and all the chairs that I served with, we would see repairs, going from Public Works being approved. And then the light went on. Gravity systems are no problems. But there are problems, I know, with obstructions. But, this will blow your mind how much a pump station costs the county. And this is what adds to the cost of operation of Public Works that nobody has talked about in the past. So it's amazing what you've put together so far. Okay.
Yeah. So, excellent point, Commissioner Rabe. Looking at this first piece of this example, those capital costs, I talked about the annual costs. The capital costs are based on what you would need today in order to have the net capital cost required in 20 years. So you would have to have a pile of money, $177,200, earning 3% a year to yield that $320,000 investment in 20 years. So that's how the numbers are generated. The total net present value is just over $392,000. And in the next slide, I want to walk you through what a gravity solution would cost for this particular example. So again, same breakdown. So we're looking at it over the same term, 20 years. Obviously, electrical and pump horsepower are not applicable because it's gravity. But our total capital investment up front is much higher. It's just short of $1.1 million. And the way that our 10, 20, and 50-year items are broken down is markedly different. So on a gravity system, you're looking at 10-year costs comprising only 5% of the initial capital investment. And that's because you simply don't have a lot of appurtenances. So this is going to include things like any manholes that have a coating that you might need to refurbish. You may need to replace some of the manhole lids and rings, that type of thing, or maybe a vent pipe that's affixed to the side of a manhole. But you have very limited infrastructure that's not buried. Similarly, you don't have anything that falls in that 20-year time frame because you don't have electrical or mechanical systems. The remainder of it's all buried infrastructure. So it's going to fall primarily under that 50-year timeline or useful life. So we have two categories, 5 and 95%. So flipping back to the table on the left, you can see how those costs break down, and the large majority of the dollars are associated with 50-year lifespan. Again, we've got straight line depreciation, so year over year, the value of that pipe and manholes decreases. And one important note here is the bottom of the second table on the right is the estimated length. In order to serve this particular development, you would have to extend gravity sewer almost 19,000 feet to get there. So it's a ways away, about 4 miles. Obviously, looking now as we go to the annual costs and capital costs, you'll see that we obviously don't have electrical costs involved. O&M is only 1% rather than the 3% of capital costs that we assumed for a pump station. And that's because you simply don't have as much to do with a gravity system. We're required to inspect and clean 10% of the overall system every year. So you're starting with a smaller investment to begin with. So in this example, that yields just under $11,000 a year as an annual cost. And your calculated capital costs, again, looking at it over a 20-year term, you're replacing those 10-year items twice. So it's the initial capital dollars and then the 2 times the 10-year item replacements. That gets you your roughly $1.2 million that's noted there. Has a fairly substantial residual value. So your net capital cost is just around $520,000. Last table, translating all of that into a net present value, you can see your annual costs, your capital costs, a net present value of about $448,000.
John, go back to that one a minute, because what's shocking to me, I didn't think there was any cost associated with gravity systems for the county, but you're saying there is.
Well, we still have to inspect and clean those piping systems. So there is a level of effort involved and a corresponding expense.
Okay, that's remarkable.
When you look at these side by side, what you're seeing here over a 20-year term is that the pump station, in this case, actually represents the better value. So it's about $56,000 less than the gravity extension. And this is primarily driven by the capital investment that's required for that gravity extension. Now, I've got another example for you. And again, it's the same type of setup here, so we'll look at the pump station. And the big differences here are, one, the total capital cost, our initial capital cost is lower. It's only $250,000. And our pump horsepower is fairly small, 3 3/4. Also, the pumps tend to run at a lower rate on a daily basis, so you're only looking at about 2.3 hours of operation every day. So we have a relatively low, excuse me, electrical cost on an annual basis. All other factors are the same as the previous example, but you can see our annual costs net out to be $7,700 a year, and the net capital investment is $210,000. When you look at the net present value of those annual and capital costs, totaling out at about $231,000. When you look at the gravity solution in this example, again, this is the same assumptions as the first example, but the estimated length is much smaller. It's only 3,700 feet. So our capital investment is much smaller from the get-go. Looking at the tables across the bottom, getting to the kind of the punchline on the lower right, you see that net present value of just over $88,000. So when you look at these two side by side, in this particular example, the gravity sewer represents the better value solution over that 20-year term. So depending on what it is that you have to do to serve a particular development by either a pump station or gravity, those costs can reflect either a positive outcome for a pump station or a negative outcome for a pump station.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Rushing.
I'm kind of baffled by these numbers a little bit, that you're looking at almost 4 times the cost on the annual cost of this example, and then you're showing such a big difference on the other. So your annual cost on this one would be $31,000 for gravity and $114,000 for the pump station. The pump station with the extra work and the extra inspections, the replacement of the parts, things like that. Is there a way of recouping that instead of charging all the customers? So let's say that a developer comes in, he gets a pump station, just like maybe for a private, just as somebody did their own private sewer, where they would go and have to pay their private sewer bill. Is there a way of billing more to those homes that are affected and not billing to the other homes which are not bearing those same costs?
That's a good question. We don't have a system that's set up at this point where we can actually bill individually for the type of infrastructure that goes in. I don't know that I would recommend that particular approach. What we will recommend is that we bring to the board, this is the estimated operating cost for this over the life of the pump station, and that the board authorize a contribution that the developer would have to make in order to offset those costs. Now, what that contribution is, that's going to be up to you. Is it 10%? Is it 50%? Is it 100% of those costs? We're going to have to get you to give us that direction. But we would think that's the best approach, as well as, and John has got another slide here, and I'm going to pull that up. As well as we think that in order to help offset those long-term needs, that not only do we have them cost share on the operation and maintenance, we also ask them to provide us with some inventory, maybe a new pump that we hold in inventory to also replace that pump when it does go out. So it's a balance of cash to help with the operations, as well as inventory to help for maintenance when we do that maintenance. And so that's how we would recommend you consider getting some contribution back to cover those long-term costs. It can be split any way the board chooses. That's just our thoughts on that.
I was just thinking kind of like an HOA. They may have a pool, or they may have something in common that everybody participates in, and they pay their dues to provide for that. You know, if you're looking at 4 times the cost on a project, that maybe again that would be captured in that neighborhood, if it's one neighborhood, because I would assume that would be one neighborhood, or
it can depend. Some of those are like that last one that John showed. That's probably just one neighborhood. That pump is for one neighborhood. Larger pumps will cover a larger area.
And so I can see splitting it out amongst a lot of homes would be that less operating cost. You know, that if you're divvying out between a lot of homes, but then that one special approval for a pump station could cost, looks like almost four times what the gravity would cost. And there is very rarely do we have a solution where it is gravity versus pump station. It's, you know, if you're getting a pump station, I can think of one maybe in the last year where it was a situation where they had gravity.
Sure.
But I think the school system had, there's an issue with going across the school system's land. And so I can think of that situation, but, you know, you have those homes that, should they pay more if the operating cost is 4 times what normally it would be?
And again, we're going to take direction from the board, but I think if the board were to look at this as in what is the upfront contribution that we can get from the developer, let's all be honest, the developer is going to pass that cost along to the individual property owner. So they are going to pay that. It's just like you would in any subdivision. When you buy a lot in a subdivision, the cost of building the road, the cost of putting it in the water and sewer is built into the cost of that lot. And you will pay for that as a landowner. So the developer is going to pass that cost along. Rather than the utility passing that cost along, we would suggest you have the developer pay those upfront contribution costs. And then, of course, that mitigates our long-term costs for having to maintain it. Does it take it away permanently? No, it certainly doesn't. Unless, of course, the board's trying to get 100% of that. Again, that's up to you. But anywhere between 1% and 100% is whatever you feel is the best contribution rate.
Is that annual operating cost including replacement of materials?
No, sir. That's just the
operation.
That's just operations of it.
So that would be where I would wonder, and I'm not going to get too deep. We got to go back in the back room, lawyers. But I would wonder legally how anything like that would stand up. That the developer would be paying anything like an annual operating maintenance cost. I don't think you could do that.
Well, again, we think that, and again, the lawyers are going to get involved with this when the board gives us better direction, but we think that we do have the ability to look at a contribution towards our long-term operation and maintenance costs, much like we do for a number of things that we have that the development community does. When they're building water and sewer lines, they're turning those over to us at their cost. Obviously, our attorneys are going to weigh in on this and give us, more legal advice, but we think there is an opportunity to do that.
I would like to add something. Commissioner Russian, 6 months ago, we talked about service areas with different rates, and you didn't want that. In fact, you went on social media and said they're getting ready to charge you different rates. And
Oh, yeah, when we were talking about charging Waxhaw customers more for their bill, and
no, that was only to cover growth.
If the Waxhaw Town Council decided they wanted to grow faster than the next one, then they would have to pay more because of what their council decided. Yeah, I remember what you're talking about now.
And the thing about this is Assistant Manager Matthews says, if we get it, the whole idea here is to quit making people of the utility pay for stuff that's costing us to maintain.
I think that was the argument I was making.
Yes, sir. I think we're both saying the same thing. It's just how do you get to it?
Right.
And
for example, a private utility, and we have those, where the customers pay a higher sewer bill because they're on, or a higher water bill maybe, because they're on a private utility. That's done by the developer. They put that in. That service bills them. We don't bill them.
Correct.
And they may pay a higher rate. And we've heard a lot over the years from our citizens about how they had to pay such a high rate.
Yes, sir.
But if you do things that are trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, it costs more. And so that's what I'm saying is if you're trying to, if a developer got a pump station and the bill's going to be 4 times operating cost annually, then maybe the sewer bill needs to be a little bit higher for that particular project. Not a regional, like where you have 20 neighborhoods going into it, but if you got one neighborhood trying to benefit from a pump station, that might need to be a consideration.
I thought we had already decided we couldn't charge different rates. So the way to get this is to get it up front from the developer. and it's put into the cost of the house, and then we're covered forever, or we're covered at whatever a future board decides the rate of contribution will be.
Correct. So as Brian mentioned earlier, what the intent of this presentation was to put forward the methodology. So again, it's a tool in the toolbox, using that life cycle cost analysis, comparing pump station to gravity, to help the board make an informed and objective decision on whether or not pump stations should or should not be approved. Now, there's all sorts of discussion about cost sharing and how we get there, and if it's something we want to do. In short, when you're looking at a cost share, we really should be focused on those annual operating costs. That's what drives the cost of the pump station.
Right.
And that the cost of electricity and that cost of O&M as a percentage of the initial capital investment, those tend to be very predictable and pretty reliable estimates. So based on that, the percentage of a contribution that you might assess to a developer, it can be anywhere from 0 to 100%. Those are the bookends, pretty wide.
And right now, we're at 0%.
Correct. So what we probably shouldn't be doing is focusing on that initial capital investment, because that initial investment, one, is borne by the developer. They construct the infrastructure and donate it to us. If there's interest in procuring replacement parts, that's a more, I guess, a more suitable way of recouping that equipment cost, because we're just getting a spare pump or whatever the widget may be that we're asking for, but we're getting that up front, and we're not contending with price escalations, changes in availability of manufacturers, things like that. You're just asking for it up front. And again, the developer is going to build that into his cost, and he's going to pass that along to the individual lot buyer.
And I'd like to point out to the board, one reason that we included, and Brian mentioned possibility of a pump. Up at Crooked Creek, we have seen problems where you couldn't buy replacement parts. You had to go out and either buy old ones at plants that were condemned, and they were getting unbelievable prices. So if we've got a pump, as John said, if we've got the same widget that's down in that hole, it'll fit.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So
as John pointed out, that, you know, what we're looking for from the board tonight is really, are you comfortable with the life cycle cost analysis as the methodology for how the development community can present their case as to why a pump station should be considered? And keep in mind that, as John said, the capital investment is theirs. We're using that really to show what is the investment that has to happen if you did gravity versus sewer versus pump station. You're going to find sometimes that there may actually be a situation where the gravity is actually a better solution, and you may look at that particular one and say, Mr. Developer, I understand for you, it may be less expensive for you to put in a pump station, but the gravity solution is a better solution. We're going to hold you to a gravity solution. You may have the opposite, where the pump station is the better solution, and you support that solution. But ultimately, it's about how do we recoup some of those long-term costs. So tonight it's about, are you okay with the methodology, with a life cycle cost analysis? And then from there, we bring back to you the ordinance changes, the policy and procedures, and we get from you at a later date, how do you want to arrive at that cost share? Is it 50%? Is it 100%? Is it based on the O&M cost and giving us spare inventory? That's what we'll have to get direction from you. We've given you a recommendation for you to think about, but that's where we'll need to get full direction. But tonight is, are you comfortable with the approach we've come up with as far as an analysis?
And I would like to say the range of 0 to 100% will probably not be decided until after this board set some, I mean, but it's a board decision that can change at any meeting.
Certainly, the board can take as much time or as little time as you like.
Right.
Obviously, you have some projects out there, 4 actually, that are sitting waiting to submit, and because they want to be reconsidered. And you may say yes to some or no to all. I can't say that, but they're on hold until we can tell them what is the process to follow to resubmit. So I would say that the sooner we can come up with at least an initial methodology, the better, so they can move forward and they can come back to you and you can review those and make a decision, a utility-based decision on that information. The board can always change those parameters, always.
Okay. Brian, I'm gonna jump to the end and I'm gonna make a motion to direct staff to develop guidelines for alternative analysis and ordinance revisions in coordination with legal staff. And then the board that's sitting at that time can determine the cost of participation that the developer would pay. Right now, they're paying $0. And we are spending a lot of money out of Public Works to keep up stuff that we felt like we need some remuneration up front. Any discussion? Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just would say that, legally, I just don't want 10 years from now, a lawsuit saying, you remember when you charged me this for annual operating cost, I would like to have that back now. And we lose a lot of that money. We've seen that happen before in other ways. And just to make sure that we got a good legal foothold. And I'm gonna support the motion because I think this is a great idea to see what's going on with these pump stations. But it definitely don't want it to bite us in the rear, 8, 9, 10 years from now.
No, and that's why we're simply asking for direction to move forward with the approach.
Yeah.
And the cost share and the details on that will come at a later date.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion to direct staff to proceed for alternative analysis. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, John. One thing you left out, I believe, that I heard in my 2-on-1, that we're going to task the developer with doing the study, and then we will check them.
Yes, sir. That's part of the recommendations is that, staff recommend that the developer put together this alternatives analysis. So please compare for us the life cycle cost of a pump station versus life cycle cost of a gravity system. What you have tasked us with doing is coming up with the guardrails. So what are the rules that they have to follow to do that?
And I thought that suggestion by y'all was genius. We're not tying up our engineering staff. We're putting it on the people that's wanting it. And that was a good move, whoever's idea it was.
Well, I appreciate that. With that, I thank you for your time.
Didn't mean to cut your presentation off, but
It's quite all right.
okay. We've already voted on I got out of order. And I do appreciate Commissioner Simpson. He was trying to help me gain some time down there, making some rapid motions, and I appreciate the help, brother. We've done the life cycle cost of the analysis. Okay, appointment of 2 extra ETJs, area representatives to the town of Marshville Planning Board, Board of Adjustment. On June the 6th, 2022, the Marshville Town Council adopted a resolution requesting that the Board of Commissioners appoint 2 representatives from the extra territorial jurisdiction area to the Marshville Planning Board of Adjustment. In accordance with North Carolina General Statute 160A-362, Union County Board of Commissioners is the appointing authority for the ETJ area of Marshville. Dr. Tom Appenzeller and Tracy Stansel currently serve in these positions. These vacancies have been advertised in accordance with the board's rule of procedure, and Dr. Appenzeller and Ms. Stansel have submitted applications for reappointment. No other applications were received. I make a motion to approve Dr. Tom Appenzeller and Tracy Stansel to the ETJ Board of Marshville. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The appointment to the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council.
Motion to approve Sergeant Ryan Caldwell. And motion to approve, let's see. How many, do we have two positions, is that right, for Teresa Holmes is applied and one?
Two full-term positions and one that is an unexpired position, so there's actually 3 county commissioner appointees.
So all 3 of those have applied, and, okay, so James Johnson and Edward Scott Journey.
Okay, we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
And then, looks like we have a couple more members of the faith community.
Yes, sir.
John Kirkpatrick, and we have Anna Goodwin for the juvenile defense attorney, and Jim Chapin for Parks and Rec representative.
Okay. You put that in the form of a motion?
Yeah, motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Patrick, if you would take us into the Union County state of emergency.
Yes, sir. Wanted to give the board an update on Union County's state of emergency. We declared a state of emergency on March 16, 2020. At that point, the Emergency Operations Center and the Joint Information Center were both activated. These were staffed through the majority of 2022, when in November we went to a virtual EOC. The EOC has been activated to this point for about 850 days. The state of emergency has remained in place mostly for funding opportunities. A lot of times when there is an emergency declaration, any funding that comes after, either from the federal government or the state, you have to have been operating under a state of emergency to qualify for those funds. So that's by and large why we have remained under that state of emergency. The governor has signaled that on August 15th, he will end the North Carolina state of emergency, and it's our recommendation that if that is to happen, that Union County also rescinds the state of emergency. There is no board action that is needed. The chair is authorized to call a state of emergency and rescind the state of emergency. So we just wanted to present this information to you all tonight that says if the governor does go forward with rescinding the state of emergency, that we would intend to follow suit. So I can answer any questions you all may have, but we wanted to just give you an update since it has been so long that we've been operating under this state of emergency.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Patrick.
Yes, sir.
All right, Manager Watson, the board consideration of enforcement of Union County Norris ordinance.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I believe this is my item.
Yeah.
Yes, I just would like to have the board consider, and I'll do this in the form of a motion, move to direct staff to evaluate our current noise ordinance, which is in section 26 of our code, research how noise ordinances are done in other counties, and then come back at a later date to the board to consider updates to our noise ordinance. And what really prompted me to make this motion is in talking with citizens and chatting with our sheriff, our district attorney, our current noise ordinance is, it's, to my mind, somewhat confused. It's not easily enforceable, and there's really only one penalty that's attached to it, which is as a Class 3 misdemeanor. And there are a number of exceptions in the noise ordinance. I think there are 15 different exceptions. Given all that, and I really don't want to, suggest what I think this ought to look like. I'd really just like our board to direct staff to do some research, to evaluate our current noise ordinance, look at how it's done in other counties, and come back to us with some proposals. In saying all that, I do appreciate that we enjoy our freedom in Union County, but I think it's important that to the extent we have a noise ordinance, that it be enforceable. That it be something that makes sense and that is enforceable for our law enforcement personnel. So that's really all I had to say on that.
And I believe you said you had talked to Sheriff Cathy about this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And, okay, so we've got a motion to direct staff to work with our sheriff's department and I guess the municipal police that we have in Union County and come back to us with a, sir?
Leave that out.
Speak up.
They got their own ordinances.
Okay.
We're talking about the county ordinance.
Okay, so this is just unincorporated Union County. Okay. Unless you're in Indian Trail, or they got a different?
If we adopt the county ordinance, they can adopt our ordinance and use it, but you can't pass an ordinance for Indian Trail.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Rick.
I'd ask that you amend yours to also staff identify what a noise is offensive.
Well, I really don't want to define too much, at this stage. I just would like staff to, to do their own research on this, evaluate our current ordinance, and come back with us with information. There is a definition in our current ordinance, but to my mind, it's pretty confusing. It's, does it disturb or injure the health or safety of a reasonable person of ordinary sensibilities within the county? So I would just, I appreciate your comment, but I would just rather keep this very general. Let's move to direct staff to do the research, to evaluate our current ordinance, look at how it's done elsewhere, to certainly solicit the input of our Office of the Sheriff, and come back with us with some, proposals.
Right. And I've heard some urban stories about our good sheriff, which are not true, but supposedly some tannerite was set off near his house and he spilled his coffee on him, but he told me that was not true. But I have heard, and I've got some relatives that love tannerite, or however you say it. Sir? And it sounds like a 747 crash. Okay, yes, sir.
Discussion. I'm not going to vote in support of the motion because our towns, they have their vehicles of already handling their own noise ordinances. I've had to deal with noise ordinances in the past. And for example, like at the shooting range, the code enforcement came out and we took a sound meter and we took readings around the range, and a diesel truck driving down the road registered higher than what we were registering with the guns. So the enforceability of it is the issue here, because even if somebody shoots tannerite or somebody pops a firecracker or whatever, you almost have to be there with a noise meter to see there's a set limit, like 70 70 whatever. If you're not hitting that number, then you're not in violation of the noise ordinance. So like a continuous noise, for example, a factory or something that was just, could be somebody with a chainsaw next door cutting down timber, a continuous noise, that might be something that could be enforced. But I just don't see how, you don't want a deputy running out with a noise meter every time somebody pops a firecracker, every time somebody shoots tannerite, because usually a one and done, and you don't get a second chance to capture that noise. So maybe a little bit of education of the public to be courteous to your neighbors would probably go just as far. And, with the towns, they have their abilities to they're a more confined area to enforce that than we are. And I'll defer to the sheriff if he wants to go out and, have meters in his deputy cars. That's, you come up here and tell us that's what you want, but I don't think that's what we want. Yeah.
We don't care whether we carry meters, but I don't think that ordinance is for a gun shop or for a one-time event. It's certainly not for a chainsaw or anything daytime. That ordinance has got nighttime regulations on it. It's got different things, but the way it's worded is not even enforceable. A good example is if your neighbor sets up a band beside you, we can't even say anything to them until after 10 o'clock, and then they can shut it down. But our noise ordinance now is very loose. It's an ordinance was in place 20 years, I know, and it can't be enforced. It's just almost amazing that you can't. It's got so many exemptions. You can set a band in a farmer's field to play all night. You can't nobody say anything about it because they're exempt. So I think it's time that the county looks at it and comes up with a reasonable ordinance that makes sense, but you have to keep in mind that it's not enforceable in the cities until their council adopts it.
Okay, and while you're speaking, Sheriff Kathy, I know David had indicated the staff would be working with your department because y'all are the ultimate enforcer.
That's fine.
So you're in favor of the ordinance being looked at?
I am. I don't have an idea what I'd like to have, but I think it's time as our population has changed, time we look at it and come up with something that we could say, this is too bad.
The other thing I would add too is in the current ordinance, there is just one penalty, and that's a criminal misdemeanor charge. And, I don't know about how everyone else feels, but I think it's much more appropriate to look at infractions and fines rather than, one penalty, which is a, class 3 misdemeanor. So, do I have an idea of what I want this future ordinance to look like? No, but that's the point, I think, of this discussion and this motion is, let's have staff research this and come back with some good ideas in conjunction with input from the Office of the Sheriff. And, let's see if we can improve, what's there, right now. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we've got a motion. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
No.
Okay, Commissioner Helms.
Yeah, the Commissioner Williams and myself and Lee Jensen and Jonathan Thomas, the chair of our planning board, and our school representatives had the opportunity to meet and discuss a safety issue for children on the Cupperson Road. And it was kind of scary to look at what they were facing with, because they've got children and parents risking their lives trying to get across Cupperson Road to go to school. Is that a fair statement, Commissioner Williams?
Yep.
And their DOT was there as well. And there was not really a lot of options. One of the things is crosswalks. And according to the DOT, we can't have a crosswalk unless it's sidewalk to sidewalk. And so Waxhaw has been looking at it. Commissioner Simpson and Waxhaw brought together a very impressive group of individuals to try to address this. And I think it is an issue that we need to take a deeper look at, because there's an opportunity. We've got the library going in right there at the end of the property. I think they quoted $20,000 for them to extend from our property to the entrance to Lawson, which would meet the requirements of a crosswalk by DOT. So I'd like to see our staff work with Waxhaw and see if we can find a way to help facilitate that. I had conversation with the manager today. We've got a library which will have a sidewalk, but the library building is out a ways. So, maybe look at using some ARPA money to go ahead and build that sidewalk, so Waxhaw can build a short sidewalk to provide access for those children to be able to get home. It additionally is creating a lot of traffic because parents that live a couple hundred yards from the school are driving, getting in the drop-off lines to take their kids because they don't want them crossing the road. I think it's an issue that we need to address, and I would like to ask staff as well to work with them and find if we can find a solution to make a safer environment it's a Cupperson Middle and High School, and Waxhaw. They're stepping up, and they're looking at solutions. Ms. Simpson was very thorough, and I'd like for us to participate in trying to find a solution to protect the children.
So your motion is to instruct staff to talk with Waxhaw.
Work on a solution about even potentially building our sidewalk early so that we don't have to wait 1 to 2 years for the library to be built, creating a safer environment for that, because we can build it. My estimation, and I may be wrong, manager or staff may tell me that we can't build that sidewalk now until after we build a library. I don't understand it, but I'd like for it looked at.
Okay.
Is that a fair assessment, Commissioner Williams?
I think so.
And anything, I've always, from my years teaching, err on the side of safety when it comes to a student. So, I will support it. We have a motion to instruct staff to talk with Waxhaw and come up with a solution of how we can work together.
How we can contribute to making that safe environment for the children.
Any discussion? Stoney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kathy, I hate calling you out, but do we have somebody directing traffic at those schools? Kathy? Does somebody direct traffic at those schools like they do at other schools?
Because we have the marginal road that goes inside it, so no.
So there's no traffic direction, so
There's not.
what would we do, the crosswalk?
Well, there's signals, there's lights.
Okay, so you got a red light, and they can walk across it when the light's red, okay. Thank you.
There's a road inside the school that goes between the two schools.
Thank you.
That's basically at one end of the school complex, and down at the other end is a major. There's no sidewalks on the school property. And so that's why one of the reasons DOT won't put crosswalks, because they have to go crosswalk to crosswalk.
We're just trying.
Sidewalk, excuse me.
We learned that they won't put in a crosswalk with lights unless there's sidewalks on both sides.
Yes.
So if it comes down to it, I think we're willing to step up, but we need staff to see what they can get done.
And we can certainly look into that. We have looked at that gap at Lawson, and the issue we're dealing with there is it's actually on the HOA's property, not the county's property. But we have it budgeted to complete that gap. We just have to work out the access agreement. Now,
I think Waxhaw is addressing that. They're working with the HOAs on that, because it's really a very short
Yeah, it is.
sidewalk for that, and it goes through the property closest to the road from their berm. So it's, but Waxhaw and Ann Simpson and her staff can assist. That's why I'd like for us to talk with them and find out how, because I think they can get a lot further with their HOA than we can.
And I think to your point about building it early, we can certainly work something out there. The construction entrance won't be a large portion of that stretch between the school and Lawson. So I think we can work it out, but I'll talk to our facilities folks tomorrow to see what we can do.
Okay.
That's if we vote on it. It takes, not one commissioner can give you work direction. It takes the board.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay, we got a motion to instruct staff to work with Waxhaw. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Got one item left, and Commissioner Helms just sort of touched on this. And let me get my paper. I'm sorry for being a little unorganized. Well, I'm gonna have to wing it. I had somebody write me thoughts. You know, every commissioner has a right to ask any question that he wants. And sometimes it can be a large task. It can take staff a half a day, a couple of days to pull the answers out. And what I would like for us to consider is giving staff direction to come back with some blueprint of asking or telling us how long it would take to get the stuff, just so that we're not tasking staff with things to do that may lead nowhere. You know, Commissioner Helms's thoughts about the sidewalk. I mean, that's a safety issue, but, you know, I'm just trying to get a little procedure started here where if we tell them to do something, 3 people raise their hand, got it. If, you know, and it's never going to prevent you from coming up here and talking to staff during the day, anytime. And there's nothing wrong with talking at night. It's just some of these requests can take a long time. And I found my paper. From time to time, board members may have issues that are of individual interest and they want to take up or have further information from staff. Often these tasks take more time than anticipated. In order to make sure that staff is fulfilling the mission of the board, certain labor-intensive tasks need to have full board knowledge and direction. I am asking that we request that staff come back at our next meeting with a process or procedure for individual commissioner requests of staff to perform major tasks. And you know, all it takes is pick up the phone, call a couple of people and tell them what you want to direct staff to do if it's not on the agenda. And then if you get, you know, we roll by majority. And I don't see, if I get a call from any commissioner wanting to direct staff to do something, I don't see that after discussing it with them and realizing their concern, I don't have any problem with supporting that other commissioners. Or if I have one, and I guess I'm not, tonight I didn't talk to anybody about this, but this is not action tonight. This is just asking staff to come back to us with some recommendations. I think it's just being courteous and keeping our staff moving forward at all times. Now, I'm making that as a motion, but I would like some discussion on it. Commissioner Simpson, you've been on here 12 years. Stoney, you've been on here 12 years.
I believe early on, I found out that through the School of Government, that any commissioner can request that any item be placed on the agenda. Then the full board has the opportunity to remove that item from the agenda if they don't want to talk about it. So it would seem to me that that the request be understood by current board members, any other board members, that they ask the chairman, ask the manager that this item be placed on the board to have information developed and research done on whatever subject it is, and it'll be on the next agenda and voted up or down. And
well, you may have just answered the procedure.
Unless it's, if it's an immediate question that's a result of some topic being discussed, I don't know how you get information to share with the board quicker than the next meeting and allow the board to act on it. So that's my thought.
And it would give staff time to research some. Commissioner Rushing, you have any comments?
Well, I guess I would say, I'm just trying to think of the last couple of months. The only thing that, I think you and I spoke during the break about the water meters. And, when a commissioner asks a question of staff in a meeting of the commissioners, maybe then the staff should say, we would like direction from the board in order to answer that question. And let's take a vote at that time. I think that might be some of the confusion, just like I think I asked, what would it cost to, for the county to do the meters instead of billing the customers, and then the county be responsible for the backflow meters? What was that cost versus the cost of doing it and making the homeowners go back and put them in? So a question like that in an open meeting, maybe staff at that time needs to say, hey, that's in depth. Would you please ask for a vote of the board? Would you put that in the form of a motion? And then that way we can do what Jerry was talking about, because I ask a lot of questions of staff, and sometimes you tell me the answer and sometimes you tell me we'll get back to you. So maybe telling me that you'll get back to me versus telling me we would like direction from the board to pursue that question, because I don't know how long it takes. I don't know if it takes 5 minutes or 5 days. I'm just asking you the question because I'm curious. So there needs to be a separation. And I can't remember, of course, I called you about a school zoning issue Saturday. Apologize bothering you on the weekend, but that guy was pretty hot. He wanted to know then. But it's something that was a simple question to answer. But I've been so sick the last 2 months, I haven't asked anybody about anything much. Have I, Mark? Have I been getting, how many times we talked in the last 2 months? So again, if it's in an open meeting where a commissioner asks a question and staff feels like it's going to be too burdensome for one commissioner to get an answer, maybe at that time, staff should say, we would like a motion. Would you put that in the form of a motion so that the board can vote on hearing that information?
Or it would, if one commissioner just requested, like Jerry said, put it on the next agenda, I think we've done anything. Let's just give them a little bit of time, 2 weeks to get the research.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. So like I said, if it's a question that I have, it's probably a question that others would like answered. Especially if a question like that with the backflow meters, how many do we have? That would be something that staff could say, that's going to be time consuming. Would you please put that in form of a motion? And it can be voted up or down, I think, that time. But if 3 commissioners are interested in hearing it and 2 are not, or 4 are not interested in hearing it, 1 are, that's the way we give directions. So I've got no problem with that. I got no problem supporting the motion. But it's, what I don't want is to get in a situation where staff picks and chooses who they want to answer.
Right.
And,
Well-
and it don't need to be behind the scenes where I call up and say, hey, can you tell me how many employees we have? And then, well, that's too much. That takes too much time to tell you that. You know, I just don't want to get into a behind the scenes issue with it. I want it to be, you know, if we're gonna do it in open session, let's do it in open session. And if you, and you all know what takes time and what doesn't. I don't know what information you got at your fingertips or not a lot of times. So if you would all do that for us, and in developing this policy, that's something that needs to be considered, because no commissioner, no matter how they feel about an issue, should be denied. You know, like tonight with the noise ordinance, I had my say, you guys had your say, and.
But you voted for it, didn't you?
What?
You voted for it, didn't you?
Voted for what?
The no's, to work with the sheriff.
The noise ordinance?
Yes.
No, I voted against it. I don't think it's enforceable.
Okay, well, what you're talking about, the backflow preventer, what came to my mind, and I should have said something that day, how is it fair for people that don't have irrigation systems to have to pay for people who have irrigation systems for the county to put in the backflow preventers?
I think we're off topic, but the problem I had is if we have a problem, we could have it from the house or the irrigation. And if it's a problem that we could have where we're having backflow into the county system, would it be better for us to put more on and it be our responsibility to start doing it versus the homeowners to go back and retroactively do it because state law changed? It was just something I thought, you know, I got thinking about how these people are going to have to pay $200-something or whatever every 2 years to have it inspected, and the burden that they had there that they didn't have before. And would it be a better thing for the county to do in the system? Would it be cheaper for the county to do in the system than to put it on the homeowner? And would it be better to put it on both meters? Because we talked about the mouse. The mouse was in a spigot, and that shut down the whole county restaurant-wise and schools for a day or two. And so if we really want to attack it and really be effective with it, that was my thought, is maybe that we do it on our side of the meter, not the other side of the meter.
All right.
Commissioner
Hale.
Yes, sir. I agree with what Stoney's saying, and agree very much with what Jerry was saying. I don't think we need to put the burden of staff telling us to take a vote. Why can't we set a policy and let the board, if you got a request like Commissioner Williams did the right way. He brought forth an item to make a request for investigation, and we voted on it. So why can we not set a policy? That's our policy.
And in 4 years, I have not known of one incident where somebody asked for something to be on the agenda that it wasn't put on.
So I'm making that in the form of a motion. Let's let the board policy be that do just what Commissioner Rushing said, but instead of putting burden on staff, it's burden on this board.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I might, I don't think maybe we understand what I'm saying. The question that I had was on a topic that the staff brought up, and we were discussing backflow meters. I mean, we were talking about backflow meters at the time, and when I asked the question, how many are we talking about? How many backflow meters are we talking about? They didn't know. And they don't have everything with them when they come into the meetings. So if they say, I'll get back to you on that, that's different than saying, go look at this policy and see if you want to change this policy. That's just a question that if they don't have the answer to it, you know, why would we not want to hear the answer to a question like that?
No, we're not saying we wouldn't.
Right, but do I have to put it on the next agenda to ask them to answer the question that they could very simply maybe bring to the next agenda? Now, if it's in depth, detail of information, like if I ask for an employee satisfaction survey, and before we give raises, now that would be something that you would bring into a motion. But if you just simply ask a question in a discussion, you know, if they need more time, or if they say, hey, we'd rather give board direction on that. We've done that before where the county manager would say, I would like to have board direction on that. something maybe controversial, something maybe that the manager wasn't comfortable with. I've had several managers, we had a couple managers that have said, I would like to have board direction on that item. And I got no problem with that, if we want to do it that way. It's just like I said, though, if I ask a question, how many trucks do we have in Public Works? We don't know. Can you tell me next meeting, or can you send it to me? Could you answer that question? That's something that I think is our job as county commissioners, and I think all of us get that information. But you've had issues that you've wanted to know what a certain thing was, and if you see a problem in a certain situation, then you might want to bring it to the board as a vote. Like if they sent me the information, said we're talking about 1,500 meters. I said, okay, I would like to put on the agenda that we talk about funding those 1,500 meters through Public Works or through ARPA funding or whatever, then we could do that. But again, just asking a question in a meeting, I don't know that any commissioner should be told you can't ask that question. You have to ask it by putting it on the next agenda. That's what I'm talking about. If it's a question about policy procedures, a question about noise ordinance, things like that, yeah, that's the appropriate thing to put on the agenda. I supported putting it on the agenda. Don't have any problem putting it on the agenda and talking about it.
Asking questions is not a problem. Giving work direction is a different item. And what Commissioner Williams' motion and mine would have been construed as work direction, because it's going to be a task they have to go after. So you're talking about two different things.
But
We'll always ask
But if you're
questions.
asking a question, and that's what it was, a question, how many meters? Like I said, if that's in-depth work, then let's just say, hey, we would like to vote as a board on that, because that's going to take a lot of man-hours.
Well, I remember during that conversation, because they don't know how many meters, because they don't know a lot of the, whether you've got the irrigation and the well tied together, the irrigation and the water tied together and everything. And to go out and research that, there was also discussion about testing whether the water was good between the meter and the house. And that's a complex issue. So,
And it boiled down to building code saying anything on the house side of the meter is the homeowner's responsibility. Didn't the email say that, Brian?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is part of the research we did on that.
That's, the state code says if it's after the meter, it's homeowners. Commissioner Simpson.
I think Stoney in his discussion made a good suggestion. We don't want to put staff on the spot like that. I'm sure some of them might not mind, others might really mind. So I think logically, Stoney asked a question of staff, or I ask a question of staff. It would be understood between staff and the manager that that question was asked, and they would consult with each other the next day and determine, and then the manager would contact that commissioner and say, Jerry, that's too much information. We'd like to ask for board consensus before we delve into that. And that would move it out of that situation, regardless of the topic.
All right. We'll let it die. Manager's comments.
I don't have any comments this evening,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Well, excuse me.
You removed item 22-561 off the consent agenda and moved it to business. Did you intend to not take that up today?
The land.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Thank you. No, I did not intend to not take it up today. But it sure seemed that way, didn't it? Those backflow preventers or check valves have caused more problems. Okay, 22-561, land purchase, portion of Union County tax map, tax parcel 08-264-008. Do you want to present?
Commissioners, this is a project that we have been working on and negotiating. We have an offer to purchase, to sell property to us from Lucas Lands out on let's get the address right. 3124 Ridge Road, Indian Trail. They own 100.3 acres plus or minus. The offer is to sell us 85 acres, and it may be another third. They want to retain 15 acres for $4.65 million. The contract, the negotiations have been that they will pay for their share of any surveying. They will pay, they will go along with any rezoning that has to be done on the property, and they will pay any back fees on their portion of the property that they retain. It is also necessary, in order to fund this, that we adopt a resolution to accept the American Rescue Plan funding in the amount of $8 million from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. The money used for this will be $4.65 million for the contract to buy the property. The rest of the money will be used towards that property or other projects as they may come about.
And you need a motion, don't you?
I do need a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution to accept the American Rescue Plan ARP funding in the amount of $8 million from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. 2, to authorize the purchase of 85 acres located at 3124 Ridge Road, Indian Trail, North Carolina, identified as a portion of Union County tax parcel 08-264-008 in the amount of $4,650,000, no dollars. Authorize county manager to execute all necessary contracts and documentation to effect said purchase, and approve capital project ordinance appropriating $4,650,000 for the land acquisition.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Well, Mr. Manager, you've already said no comments. Commissioner Simpson.
No comments this evening.
Commissioner Rushing.
Well, I told the manager if he'd do no comments, I'd do no comments, but I'm gonna back out on that a little bit. I want to thank everybody, the outpouring of support we've had from the community and the county employees has been tremendous. I'm doing much better. Looking forward to starting chemotherapy on the leukemia diagnosis that I had, and look forward to working. And thank goodness it doesn't take much energy to say yay and nay. I will ask for a prescription from my doctor to provide you gentlemen that says if you'll just agree with me on everything, it'll cause less stress and quicker healing. Thank you.
Commissioner Helms.
Yeah, I'd like to congratulate our Cognac winners tonight. That was an awesome presentation recognizing the value of our employees, and I appreciate staff putting that together. I'd also like to commend Ann Simpson, Commissioner in Waxhaw, for her efforts to try to bring to light the exposure for the children on Cupperson Road, and I hope we can work with it. Thank you.
Commissioner, Vice Chairman Williams.
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I apologize for my snafus tonight. I have no comments. Thank you, staff, for all you do. Thank you to Public Works for bringing in that example of a check valve. I think a picture's worth 10,000 words. And with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.